Hey y'all, it's Sarah. I'm back again trying to get a couple weeks ahead of myself. So I just finished this spread and got ready to get it shared. So I've already done the seashells if you want to see how I did some of those. And to make this week's speedier, I'm using the seashells again, but we're focusing this time on this cute little guy, this little seahorse here. And I want to share where I got kind of the base of this from. This is, maybe you can see that. This is the stencil. I got it from Dollar Tree, and it looks like this. It's cute. You can tell it's a little basic. It's a little plain. We're going to turn this guy into this guy today. So I want to go ahead and jump into this. I'm adding details using both of these stencils just to get all these the other seashells and things. So let's go ahead and get started. First thing I usually do is add my divided areas. Those are the places that I know I need for the week. My meal plan, hydration, weather, all those things. I'm using just a neutral tan highlighter to do this. I'm bringing in my ruler and I want to get my alignment. And I recommend just trying to get it done in one stroke. Don't hesitate or slow down, and you'll get a really smooth line that looks like it's printed. I'm not putting a lot of pressure towards my ruler. I don't want to ruin my marker tip. But I'm just going to swoop that down. And I'm using tan because obviously this is going to be kind of beachy and sea life, so I thought this would be a good way to mimic the sand. So for me, I do a place for dinner, a place for hydration. You could add as many little spots as you needed to. And I'm doing a place for my weather. So I've got my little seahorse here and I'm working on my alignment. Now I'm using the big planner and I've got this little spot here. I'm putting my first one right around here. I'm trying to work him around that spot a little bit. Sometimes I need this little lined area down here. Sometimes I don't. It just depends. So I would suggest trying to, you might use it up here in this grid area where it's not taking away from anything, but I just wanted to put him down here for some reason. So I'm working him around. I'm trying to get it into the curve of his back there. Okay. I'm pretty much tracing around everything on this little guy. Not so much maybe his eyeball area. I'm going to work around that a little. And let's see. This spot, a little tough to get into, but we're going to try. And don't worry if you don't get it outlined perfectly. We're going to add so many details that it won't be that big of a deal. So I'm trying to go around the eyeball area a little bit, just so I know where it's at. I'll probably use a little circle stencil later just to do that eyeball in a little rounder, a little cleaner. So at this point, I'm just going to go in. The only thing, I guess I could do that part off camera. The only thing that I am going to show you that I'm doing a little different as far as the stencil goes is this little fin on his back. I'm not going across this bottom section here. And I'm not going really across any of it. I'm just doing the outline of it. And Everything else I'll fill in myself. I'll put all the details into myself, or in for myself. And I'm going to go ahead and do this off camera and come back and show you how I traced the rest of it out. So this is what I've got traced out so far. And I want to show you this. You can see I jumped out in the stencil in a couple places. I made mistakes. These are the things that I like to share because I learn from those, and I actually probably learn more from the errors that I make than if I was to get it right spot on the first time. I tend to learn a little better from trying to correct my errors, so I'll leave them. I'll try to fix them as I'm going. We'll see how it works out, just in case you make the same mistakes. So this is all of his insides here. The only thing that I wanted to point out is down here with the tail, this part right here is kind of a little oval. Oops, sorry. This part right here is kind of an oval, but I did not trace out the entire oval because I wanted to do a little curly Q right there. Like I wanted to swirl his little tail around. So now that that part's done, let's get into giving him a body, giving him some real substance so that he doesn't look stencily. First place I'm going to start is at his head. And just going to try to match things up a little. Let's slide this other paper out of the way. Try to match things up a little right about here. I didn't get my lines super dark, and part of that has to do with the way these vinyl stencils are made. I don't know if you can see that, but do you see the cutout on this one? Can you see it's a little, it's a little jaggedy. I mean, it's a Dollar Tree stencil. I'm still happy with it, but you can see it's just a hair jaggedy along there. And sometimes it makes that pen tip. By the way, I'm just using a Dollar Tree ballpoint pen. This is one of the ones that has the stylus on it. You guys know that I'm a big fan of ballpoints for doing stuff like this. This is usually my favorite, is the Dollar Tree Clip Click, but this happened to be the one I grabbed. So this is what I'm using. Let's go ahead and start connecting these. Now, this one honestly is pretty forgiving as far as connecting these empty spots, because these little gaps are just so small. So keeping in similar directions to whatever squares are next to him, or scales, or whatever those spots are. I'm trying to do my best to connect them all. Now, when I get further down at the bottom of this tail, I think I'm going to try to keep it a little straighter, so that tail looks a little smoother. Like I said, I'm trying. Weirdly enough, I don't have super great control of my hands to be doing stuff like this, but I make do, and I think it turns out all right for somebody that's not really an artist. So I may tell you what I'm doing, and I might not actually accomplish it in front of you, but I do try. All right, I feel like that's fairly round. It's not quite as maybe bumpy looking as these parts. Now let's do his tummy. Seahorses remind me of how toddlers stand. I don't know why, they just do. I think the way they kind of angle outwards, toddlers tend to bow their backs out. My son still walks this way. And right there, I just swooped up. Now, this is one of those times where using the kind of scratchy line art is useful to me because I don't actually have great control. I work that kind of out of controlness into what I'm doing. So now he's got a full body. Let's come to his fin. The reason I didn't trace the fin this way is because if you trace it all the way out, it disconnects the fin from his body entirely, and I'll show you. So if you were to trace it all the way out, it's almost disconnected from his body. So that's why we didn't trace it that way. So now I can just do a little line to connect that fin. And right here in this area, so this is where we start adding some details here. Right here in this area of his back, I'm going to go over these lines again and darken them because I feel like right where they meet that fin, it would almost be a little shadowy. So right in there, you can see that line's a little darker than some of these others. You can do his whole backside that way if you like. But we're going to do it in some specific places here. For instance, right here. So I'm going to scratch it a little darker right there under this kind of jawline area. And this area. And I might just come in and see this shape here. I'm going to try to mimic it a little. So I tried to mimic it there. And maybe look like a number 1 there. I'm going to give him a strong jawline here. So I'm just following that similar curve to, if you were not feeling super confident about doing that part, bring your stencil back over and just do that part using the stencil inside of it. Okay, let's get to some fun little details that really give this guy some dimension. On all of his little squares, I don't know what those are. I don't know if they're scales or what. But I'm going to take my pen and along the bottom section of each one of them and maybe one of the sides, we're going to do a slightly darker line. So even on these odd shaped ones, we'll still throw a little of that in. Now we're just doing it to a couple of sides, and if you notice, that gives it dimension, and I'm going to show that on the center ones here since they have 4 sides to them basically. But you want to make sure whatever way you're doing this, you keep all of them the same direction. And I have to turn my paper a lot just to hit some of those angles a little smoother. This section like this, I got to change it up a little on this area. I think I did them the opposite on my test run, but it's fine. It's just given the idea. We don't have to be perfect about where the shade, the shadow, the dimension. Your brain is going to just assume that it's there if it sees those details. So rather than watch me sit and do every one of these, just jump ahead and go ahead and get each one of these little scale areas. Get one side of it just a little darker with your pen. Maybe fill in any places you didn't trace out super well. Like I said, I have a little problem with that stencil as far as the way it was cut. The cuts, it's like their blade maybe wasn't as sharp as it could have been at the time, and it didn't get as crisp and clean of a cut. So these right here, just so you can see what I did this bottom section in the bottom part of this curve and up. Same thing here, bottom section underneath this upper curve and then up. So I'm going to continue to do this all the way around. Okay, so I finished that part, and you can see what a difference it makes to make those areas look raised and jump off this body. And really all I did was just trace out two sides of hopefully whatever was a four-sided shape, or as close as I could get to it. I should probably give y'all the heads up. If you're hanging out with me to learn art, I am not teaching art. I am teaching you how to get cute stuff down on your planner. I know nothing about actual art. I've never taken art in any real form. So I just am here to show you how to fake it. I'm coming in on this little fin right here and just scratching in a little bit of little something right there. If you can see that. Now I'm coming on this back fin area. I really feel like that needs a little, it needs a little better tracing. See how jaggedy that looks? It just doesn't, it didn't trace super well for me. There we go, much darker. So right here, I'm just going to have an easier time flicking downwards. So I'm going to start right at his back and flick some longer lines downwards. Like that. And I might even come in and do a few really small ones. I'm just changing the length of my flicks, doing a little small flick or a longer flick. So a few of those. Now we're going to get into dotting this guy. And the way I went about doing this is very similar to how we did this darker outline. So in the places where, or the direction that I did the darker outlines, I started adding dots. So you can see, I'm just kind of going around the bottom areas. I feel like that could be even darker there. So on all of these little pieces, these little scale-like pieces, I'm trying to work around that little, I doubt it will even be all that noticeable. And there, I just scribbled into it with a few more lines. Won't be a big deal once it's colored in. So we're going to go around all of these areas and just dot, 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 dot. All the way to the ones that I can actually get dots in. All of his tummy ones and the center ones are pretty easy. So instead of making you watch me do all the dotting, I'm going to go ahead and do the dotting of the rest of these scales, this center section, because we're going to do this back section maybe all the way down. So I'm going to go ahead and finish off this center section of the dotting. Okay, I finished out my center section of doing the dotting. I'm going to go ahead and come up to this jawline. I've got that little error there. That's fine. I'm just going to dot around it a little. I might do some up here. Just in this lower section of his muzzle or his mouth, or I feel like that did not trace out well, but I think once I go to color it, it'll be fine. So maybe a few spots up in his little spiky portion right up there. Certainly inside of these little places that I made, I'm going to do a few dots there. And right about there. Maybe let's go ahead and do some here. Okay, now look at his face. Look at the detail we've started. You've got this versus that. That's a big difference. So let's go ahead and start around the back. And so for the back, rather than doing each square, I started just dotting all the way down this back side. And a little thing that you might notice is the closer I get to this line here, the more densely I put the dots together. And if I throw some a little further out here, they're a little more sparse. So almost like they're fading outwards away from his back. So I keep the density a little more in these places, and then if I come further inwards for him, I won't dot nearly as heavily, if that makes sense. Hopefully I described that well. So here we go. Look how that's looking already. He's got some character. He's got some attitude here. Right as it curves here, I will probably go a little heavier than I did on his back. So right in this curve, I'm not sure why I chose this curve. I just did. So I'm just going to dot that slightly heavier down through here. Can you see how that's a little heavier? And I might even just take that heaviness in a little. There we go. I think that's okay. And see, I had a mistake right there too. I think it blends in fine now at this point. I want to round that tail a little better. There we go. That's a little better swoop. So I'm not carrying that density all the way down on that side. I'm just doing it in that curve. And like I said, I don't know why I chose that curve. My brain said that was a good spot to try. And I just darken that line a little bit. I'm going to do it down the bottom of his little tail. Let's finish out his little curve. So I did that curl, and I'm going to try to meet back up to it so it looks like it's truly curled up. That's good enough for me. Round is not my favorite shape to try to, well, I can't draw perfectly round, and I can't draw a straight line either, so I shouldn't probably just say round is one I can't do, because I can't do straight lines either. Now I'm at the bottom of the tail, and once again, I have no explanation as to why I chose the bottom of the tail. For some reason, I just felt like that made sense. Like, I feel like it made some visible sense. I might throw some up here to emphasize his curly tail a little. And I'm still trying to get that tail to look. There we go. I think that's a little better on his tail. Now you can see him a little further out. I think right about here, I'm just going to do a few little scratchy lines. Just a little something so it's not quite as bare. I might come down here and pop a few little a few little of the dots here and there. Maybe right here under his neckline. A few, almost did those in like a triangular shape right there under his neckline. This eyeball is driving me crazy. Let me find a stencil that fits it. Okay, because I know I cannot draw a circle, I was trying to find a stencil that would fit pretty closely to the shape or the size that one was. There we go. I find that a little better. He still looks a little confused. I'm not sure. I'm bringing in another circle. This one's just a smaller circle. I grabbed this one. It was just easier to use. So I'm pulling that circle. I'm aligning the edge of my circle here to the very edge here. This is a slightly smaller circle. It's going to pull, it's going to kind of pull his eyeball forward looking. Instead of just having a solid black eyeball, there'll be some white to his eyeball. But you could have just colored it in completely and used a white pen. I'm just doing this with my ink pen. Wow, he looks a little hypnotized right now. So I just colored that in, and you know what? There was a couple of gaps when I colored it in, and I left them because now he's got cute little eye highlights. So for the most part, that is all of your seahorse details. Now I'm going to tell you, when you look at my example, here's my test run. If you look at it, I have seahorses going both ways. That is just, if you hadn't realized it, flip your stencil over and just trace it this direction. It's a little weirder to trace because you can definitely, on these stencils, you can tell and feel that there is a front and a back to them. Just the way that they're cut out, you can feel the difference. So just flip it over the other way. It might take a little more effort because of the way that it's made. You'll kind of feel the difference. Just work around it. If you're more comfortable outlining it with a pencil first, maybe do that and then go back in. I don't do that because I'm not very great at tracing over my own pencil work. So I run for it. I do my best to hopefully get it right with a pen on my first attempt. And if I don't, I'm fine with it. I'm going to find a way to fix it somehow, and I'll probably learn something from it when I do. So as far as the shells go, I'm going to come in and start putting my shells in and just getting them completed out. Since I already did a video on all these shells, the video also included how I did the freehand on some of the other sea life, the corals and the plants and things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and start filling some of those things in so it's not completely repetitive. And then when I come back, I'll show you how I got the different tones and things with markers. You can use any colors you want to. I'm going to be sharing with a couple of markers just because it's faster for me, but really you could just use one marker, still do very similar with it by layering those colors. I just happen to have shades, several shades in this pale green, but remember, you don't have to do that. I've shown that many times. These markers in our planner can be layered very, very easily, as long as you give them a little bit of time in between those layers to dry. You can layer as many times as you want to, really, and just darken that shade every time, so you don't need 5 shades of the same color. You really just need the